Hello and good day to you. This is Tracy Harrison from the School of Applied Functional Medicine. Today, we're talking about antioxidants, and I'm excited to chat with you about this topic. Right now, we're in the middle of a brand new full revision live delivery of one of our favorites, the most intense perhaps, but one of our favorite deep dive clinical courses, which is mitochondrial dysfunction and cellular metabolism. And we talk quite a bit about the difference between antioxidants and pro-oxidants. And I want to start us off amongst our practitioner community here in terms of stating a truth that may be hard for you to swallow, but I hope 40 minutes from now, you have a new set of assumptions with which to work, which is that antioxidants, the things you think of as being antioxidant, right? Whether it's vitamin A or resveratrol or curcumin or quercetin, right? These things that we find in our foods, all of these things, my friends, you think about them as being potent antioxidants, and we need to get lots and lots of them in our diet, and we should be ideally taking supplements of lots of them in order to flood the body with antioxidants, because modern life as we know it is so pro-oxidant. The more protection we have, the better. Well, there's a lot of myths out there in the progressive and functional medical world that aren't necessarily true. The reality is that, yes, we have epidemics of chronic disease where we know that excessive oxidative stress, right, the buildup of oxidative stress caused by oxidative damage to tissue because of a long-standing reduction oxidation imbalance. Right? We know that that's at the root of a lot of different chronic disease epidemics, whether we're talking about arthritis or atherosclerosis or Alzheimer's disease, right? Absolutely, this redox imbalance where we're overloaded with pro-oxidant damage and we don't have enough antioxidant response in order to balance these things is absolutely at the root. But this does not mean that pro-oxidants or oxidative stress is bad. In fact, fairly recent published peer-reviewed research is making it very clear that if we don't have enough oxidative stress, we are very likely to still struggle with disease, and maybe even more dramatic disease than we do when we have the opposite extreme, which is an overload, which brings us back to the truth that so much of resilient health and vitality in the human body is based on balance. And this brings, I think, back to mind one of the most potent and actually true adages about the human body. We laugh at SAFM all the time about old adages like, oh, you are what you eat. Well, that's sort of kind of true, right? You're actually what you eat, digest, absorb, convert to final forms, and get past the cell membrane, which is a much higher hurdle for actually getting nutrition into the body, to being nourished. And just because we're focused on eating healthier food does not necessarily mean that all those wonderful micronutrients are actually getting where we need them to be. So you are what you eat, kind of true, maybe oversimplified. And this is the problem with adages and a lot of mainstream health guidance. You simplifies truths to the point where they're maybe not so true anymore, right? It's like Einstein used to say, simplify, but don't simplify so much that your brains fall out. Oversimplification can lead us awry. But I will tell you an old adage that I think was true then, it's true now, and can be one of the most important truths that we can teach our patients, is that in the human body, you must use it or you will lose it. Right? Use it or lose it. You want to keep your brain in good, high-performing function? You got to use it. You got to activate it. You want to keep your muscles nice and good muscle mass and strong over time as we age? You got to use it, right? To avoid losing it. And it's a good reminder that the human body is not a dumb bucket, right? Where you just dump stuff in, where we are superior to the intellect, the innate intellect of the human body. In fact, the human body is exquisite at adaptive survival. And when circumstances support it, adaptive thriving. We've spoken in prior Facebook Lives, however, that you don't get to thrive until you convince the body that you're easily surviving, which is one of the ways in which stress can be so disease potentiating and exacerbating 100% on its own because of all of the natural thriving mechanisms in the body that are literally blocked. They are purposefully impaired during times of high stress. Because in the body's wisdom, if you're running for your life, if you're fighting, flighting, and hiding, why do we need to worry about fertility? Why do we need to worry about detoxification? Why do we even need to worry about sleep or digestion? Those things are superfluous. They are optional. They are unnecessary to survive. If we're living our lives in a way that on a day-over-day basis makes our nervous system convinced that our survival is not assured, we're going to struggle to do a lot of things necessary to maintain optimal health. Not because the body is dysfunctional or weak or dumb or anything else, but because we're giving our body the wrong signals. Until we convince our body that our survival is assured through our responses to our life around us, the body's not going to be fooled. I like to say you're not going to fake out your own nervous system on the real status of your stress. You can fake out your parents, your friends, your spouse, your social media community, sure. All of those are easily faked. But your own nervous system is not going to be faked out about the real status of your stress. And this is where the body's own wisdom is something that we would be best, I think, directed to boost and support rather than trying to outsmart or micromanage. How do we boost the body's own natural endogenous intelligence and capability? This is true in the arena of stress management. It's also true in the arena of antioxidant function, because for all of the substances that we might try to consume external to the body, whether it's more broccoli or more onions, more garlic, or more resveratrol, or more quercetin, or more alpha-lipoic acid, more vitamin C, more liposomal glutathione, right? All of these things that sound so great. And they can be great in certain circumstances for targeted purposes for a period of time. However, the body survived for a long, long time, and a lot of early humans thrived really well before the invention of supplements, much less the invention of bioavailable glutathione supplements. These are new arrivals on the medical and the health stage. But the body survived for a long time when there were a lot of threats. Certainly a lot of pro-inflammatory and therefore pro-oxidant threats. And how did we do that? Well, because the body in its own intelligence and adaptive ability to survive and then thrive was able to be stimulated by our threats to be more responsive to protect us. And this brings in one of the most important truths. We need oxidative stress. If you don't have it, if you don't use it, you're going to lose it. So you have to stimulate your body's own and endogenous antioxidant function in order to adapt and provide good resilient capability to thrive in the environment you're asking your body to live. So can you get overloaded with oxidative stress, in particular because your endogenous antioxidant pathways are maybe blocked or not supported, especially with things like insufficient levels of minerals like zinc and manganese and copper and molybdenum? Absolutely. Or maybe not enough B vitamins? Absolutely. Nutrition is huge because all those endogenous antioxidant pathways, which generally involve enzymes that require nutrient cofactors, especially B vitamins and minerals. Please remember that part. But we don't want to wipe out so much of the oxidative stress that our own endogenous pathways respond by going, I'm not sensing a lot of stress. I'm not sensing a lot of demand for me. So, I'm going to hang out. I'm going to suppress myself because there's not enough oxidative stress out there for me to bother to be activated. This is a problem. This is, by the way, one of the mechanisms in which a suppressed metabolism, suppressed physical exercise and mobility, suppressed mental emotional stress, being so understimulated in life that you're bored out of your mind, being so understimulated from a relationship viewpoint that you're sort of isolated and living in a bubble. People don't thrive in those scenarios. We see this all the time in our practice. People who have such a weakened appetite that they don't eat very much. People who are so sedentary, it would be easy. The logical conclusion of don't exercise too much. It might be too much wear and tear on your body. Well, then sitting around should promote health. No, it doesn't. It promotes death from all causes. Use it or lose it. We want to stimulate the body to have a strong, appropriate, and sustainable, protective, adaptive, ideally thriving response. So here's the thing. We want to have oxidative stress. We do. We want to have it from multiple different pathways on an ongoing basis, but in doses that we can manage, doses that are appropriate for where we are, which is why you've all heard me talk before about the awesome mountain in my backyard and how the mountain itself is neither friend nor foe. The mountain just is. It's part of nature. It's natural. I'm pretty physically fit. I confront the mountain on nearly a daily basis. I go for a hike. We call it a workout. It has a hormetic adaptive benefit for me because each time I go and hike up the mountain with some of my beloved dogs, all right, I challenge my body. I challenge my body to a degree that triggers my own protective internal mechanisms in a way that is well supported so that the next day I'm not utterly exhausted and I can't get out of bed with muscle pain and joint pain and fatigue and shortness of breath because I took on too much of a challenge. I'm well adapted for that challenge. It's appropriate for my level of fitness. My mother, with her 12 different drugs and 12 different chronic disease diagnoses, I love her dearly, but she would not have a very positive encounter with the mountain. It's not appropriate for her level of fitness, right? She would not do well in that encounter, right? We can talk about all sorts of encounters with a certain degree of professional stress, encounters with certain type of toxins, encounters with certain levels of sleep deprivation, encounters with certain viruses, certain levels of viral load, right? Are you fit for the challenge or not? Will it have stimulatory, survival, adaptive, positive benefits, or will it be overloading and promote damage in the body, right? This is not so much about the mountain, about the virus, about the food. It's more about who are you as a person? Who is a unique patient? We need to be asking not what disease does this patient accurately get diagnosed with, but who is this person? Who is this person who seems to be struggling with this particular type of dis-ease dynamic? And how can we help them to modify their own life system to be more appropriate and of better balance for their unique situation and their unique biochemistry? And so we come back to the notion of balance. And this is really what hormesis is about. And I love the concept of hormesis because it's a concept that evolved from the modern science of toxicology. And, there's a lot of myths out there about toxins as well. Another old adage, we thought for a long, long time, the dose makes the poison. Not so much. Kind of like we are what we eat. It's sort of true. But there's aspects of it that are not true. The dose does not make the poison in a linear type of fashion. What we've actually learned is that chronic, very, very low levels of exposure to toxins actually do a great job of stimulating our body's own natural detoxification and antioxidant enzymes, and it's part of what makes us more resilient. Part of being a good detoxifier is having something to detoxify, having the stimulus for a hormetic response that supports our ability to navigate the challenge. Again, use it or lose it, right? If you want to have a better oxygen management in the lungs, we need to be challenging our tissue with regard to oxygen availability and access. If we want to develop larger, stronger muscles, we have to challenge those muscles so it has an adaptive response. If we want to boost our metabolism, then this is where things like longer overnight extended fasting or intermittent fasting can promote better metabolism, right? We are using it so we don't lose it. We're leaning on our body's adaptive capabilities to stimulate them to be stronger and to be more resilient. So use it or lose it. This is why we need to open up to challenge. We don't educate patients that oxidative stress is all bad. It's actually not true. We need oxidative stress. It's a good reminder of some of the unintended consequences of some of the choices that we make. Things like non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. It sounds like a great idea, right? Put a chemical substance in the body that literally blocks certain pro-inflammatory pathways like COX-1 and COX-2. Sounds like a great idea. But turns out we need these pathways in order to stimulate really necessary adaptive mechanisms in the body, like maintaining the protective mucosal lining in the gut. So while taking a drug like that could help to reduce pain, which could certainly be critical and bring blessed relief for a short period of time for a particular purpose, but as an ongoing mechanism, that's not healing. In fact, it's promoting dis-ease. It's stopping the body's own adaptive mechanisms that are driven by a stimulus. And there are lots of things in the body that need stress hormones, that need some toxins, that need some oxidative stress in order to stimulate them. Just like in our lives, in our relationships, in our jobs, in our personal goals, a little bit of angst, a little bit of frustration, a little bit of motivation is a good thing, right? Just enough to pop us into action, right? To not wear us out and depress us and exhaust us, but to pop us into action to stimulate our response, right? We need that stimulatory hormetic type of dynamic. And so suffice this to say that a principle that we teach at SAFM is that maintaining a healthy lifestyle is not about perfection. You could actually argue that perfection is counterproductive. First of all, it's also crazy, exhausting, and stressful and undoable by the vast majority of people. Perfectionism brings a lot of sympathetic nervous system activation, which doesn't really promote health of any type. But keeping more of a balance, like 90-10, 85-15, right? Even during rough weeks, 80-20. It's not about trying to be perfect. It's about trying in general to maintain health foundational lifestyle choices, but also allowing a little bit of anything goes. It's okay. You could actually argue it's health promoting to be so excited about something you're doing that you sometimes get a real short night of sleep. Sometimes you eat a crappy meal, right? You go out with your friends, you go home and your mom has made this amazing pro-inflammatory dish from your childhood. But it looks and smells like childhood and it's going to warm your heart, even while it may present maybe way too much refined sugar and maybe some chemicals. Okay, as an exception, it's actually part of that balance that stimulates us. It's even true that sometimes doing things that causes you to wake up the next day feeling a little exhausted, feeling a little fatigued, a little achy, those are things that can, first of all, keep us getting back on track, right? If it's uncomfortable to get off in the weeds, that may be a good thing, because if you do it for one day and you don't feel that bad, you may think, turns out that didn't matter too much. Let me do it for the second day and the third day and the fourth day. Well, if you teach your patients to be self-aware, by a certain point, they're like, oh my God, this sucks. I feel terrible. And they can get themselves back on track, back in line with their health foundations, so that the amount of time they spend off in the weeds is hormetic. It stimulates a bringing back in line with supporting better balance. Perfectionism is not only not necessary in the realm of resilient health and vitality, it can actually be counterproductive. So let's talk about antioxidants. So first of all, there are lots of things that people think about as having antioxidant capability. And it's true that when you do things like consume more cruciferous vegetables, or take quercetin, or take resveratrol, right? All of these different phytonutrients, whether it's polyphenols or flavonoids, right? We think about these as being antioxidant ingredients from foods, from whole natural plant foods. Okay, well, here's something that might surprise you. Those substances themselves, in and of themselves, by the definition that an antioxidant is something that directly counters free radicals, right? Reactive oxygen or reactive nitrogen species. And there's even pro-oxidants that are not free radicals, actually. There's thousands and thousands of them. But those nutrients in plant foods are actually not antioxidants. In fact, they're pro-oxidant. Yes, these substances are pro-oxidant, but what they do is they stimulate your body's own endogenous antioxidant pathways to have that antioxidant response. And so while we label a lot of things in our environment, whether it's a food, a nutrient, a supplement, we label them as being antioxidants. Nearly all of them are actually not. Right? So things like vitamin E. Vitamin E is actually itself an antioxidant, but the vast majority of these substances are pro-oxidant. And you get exposed to myriad different versions of them in a good, rich, diverse whole foods diet, right? You're not getting thousands and thousands of milligrams of one particular substance. You're getting little tiny levels of all sorts of different rich nutrients because, we may buy a supplement that has just quercetin in it, right? But a stalk of broccoli has literally hundreds, right? At last count, more than 700 different individual nutrients, all of which can have a stimulatory endogenous support for our body's own natural pathways to promote thriving and survival, including antioxidant pathways like stimulating an enzyme pathway like NRF2, which stimulates more reduction of glutathione so it's available for antioxidant function. So what this means, and you all know this, but I really want you to understand this in particular. Can supplements be valuable? 100%, totally, especially for targeted purposes, for defined periods of time, for a specific purpose. But are supplements a substitute for food? No, no way, no how, not ever. Maybe in the case where people have had overt, severe anatomical surgery or dysfunctioning or disease in their gastrointestinal tract and absorption of nutrients from food is virtually impossible, then sure, for a very short period of time in those rare scenarios, we would revert to a fortified, fundamental or elemental food product, right? But for the vast, vast, vast majority of people that we are serving, supplements will never, ever be a substitute for food. It's kind of like saying a multivitamin is a substitute for a salad. It's so not that. It's hilarious. There are thousands of ingredients that can promote health in a salad. A multivitamin, at last count, it tends to have about 24. So it is much better to understand what are targeted specific nutrient needs for a given individual. Maybe because of what their diet doesn't or doesn't make omnipresent in their daily experience, or maybe because of genetic impairments, for example. Just as an example, people who, consume maybe a high protein, high fat diet may not get enough folate. People who consume a vegan diet may not have enough vitamin B12 or zinc, right? People who have different types of genetic variants may struggle with, for example, sufficient levels of activated vitamin B6. Through the functional medicine lens, we can learn to target our assessment to get at those particular things so that they need targeted support with a particular cofactor. We can make sure that they get that. But otherwise, encouraging them to explore and savor and put their financial abundance into a richer diversity of whole, natural, preferably chemical-free, right? Pesticide-free or organic food products, so that our body can act on the wisdom that it has gleaned from millennia of how it should respond to the stimulus from the phytonutrients in these foods in order to have the most health and longevity promoting response endogenously. And so let's talk about some of the other interesting kind of examples of this, right? So when we think about the load of oxidative stress that we encounter, first of all of you are likely familiar that just being here, sitting here, chatting, right? Breathing, having quadrillions of mitochondria in our body right now, producing a pretty incomprehensible level of ATP right now, is producing a massive amount of oxidative stress. Massive. Just living and breathing is producing things like superoxide radicals and peroxides, right? Just being here. And in our intracellular environments, we need good, potent antioxidant capabilities from things like glutathione peroxidase and catalase, right? And these are endogenous pathways that need nutrients. Nutrients like pyridoxal 5-phosphate, the activated form of vitamin B6. That need, like I was saying before, minerals like zinc and copper and manganese and molybdenum. And minerals, by the way, are, I believe, the nutrient that we are most likely to be missing, that it would make a lot of sense to boost. Now, that doesn't mean you have to do it through a supplement, right? Per se, you can do things, or a refined supplement, I could say, right? You can boost mineral-rich foods. You can take them in even in the form of things like seaweed and algae, right? Things like chlorella and spirulina, which have good amounts, especially of the trace minerals that are less likely to be prevalent in our soil, not because it isn't present in the soil naturally, because humans have been evolving for millennia, right? Before supplement companies existed. But because we've mucked with the soil, right? Because we carry out factory farming, we have topsoil depletion. We don't tend to put good natural fertilizer from animal dung and decayed animal waste products back into the soil like nature provides, in order to take minerals out and put minerals back in, and take minerals out with the harvest of food and then put them back. But minerals come from the soil. They don't come from the sun. You can't go to your left butt cheek to just get a little more zinc or molybdenum. If it's not coming into the food from the soil, it ain't happening, folks. So the vast majority of our foods, unfortunately, unless you are composting and building your own backyard garden and providing so much of your own food, which is how humans ate for a long, long time, modern agriculture is making our foods mineral deficient in a serious way. And unfortunately, that's even happening with organically produced foods, because Organic agriculture used to mean small farms, right? And it still might, especially as it relates to local CSAs or farmers markets and these kinds of things, which I'm really passionate about. These are things where you can still get good, incredible, mineral-rich foods, right? Whether it's dark leafy greens or root vegetables, right? Really laden with both macro and micro and trace essential minerals. But even organic farms today, my friends, especially here in the US, are massive. They're still growing square miles of broccoli and not necessarily practicing any natural, evolutionary, or biodynamic or any type of farming that prioritizes the health of the soil over everything else. Because minerals in particular, if they're not in the soil, they're not in the food. And if they're not in the food, they're not in our bodies. And so this is a really critical component of supporting all of these endogenous antioxidant pathways, right? Whether it's people who have type 2 diabetes, where all of that excess blood sugar is putting huge demands on our redox balance with glutathione, right? These are individuals who could seriously use some support for boosting glutathione, just as one example, but it requires nutrients to be able to do that. Nutrients that we get in those whole natural foods. And so it's a great opportunity to teach the people you support in your practice why a supplement is not food. And for that matter, food that you get from big, huge, major national or international farms at your grocery store is not better than the local farmer's market. And the local farmer's market may not be better than your own backyard. Now, we got to meet people where they're at, right? We can't take someone who's pulling up in the McDonald's drive-thru every day for their definition of dinner and get them to start, supplying all of their food from the backyard of their house. That's not going to happen. We can meet people where they're at. And if people are consuming a lot of fast food, nutrient depleted, chemical laden, calorie rich, chemical rich, but nutrient poor foods, then yeah, multivitamin sounds like a fantastic place to begin. We have to begin where people are, but then keep moving. It's a progressive journey to solidify stronger foundations of health. So that we don't stop at the notion of a multivitamin, but we continue to integrate more and more and more progressive variety and preponderance of nutrient-rich foods, and then we support people to source those from places that are more likely to be nutrient diverse and also nutrient rich. A really potent opportunity. Here, I'm coming to you from the mountains of Western North Carolina in the United States. We are coming into late spring and the farmers markets are just starting to bust open with a lot of vegetables and especially leafy greens and herbs, in some cases that people have never even heard of, much less seen and been able to purchase. Because our modern agriculture is not only often nutrient poor, it's become very narrow in focus. We have a lot more monocultured crops. We've lost a lot of the heirloom, the rich, diverse heirloom crops that added important biodiversity to our agricultural communities overall, and supporting the symbiotic diversity of microbes that support the diversity of the plants, that support the diversity of the microbes, that support the diversity of the plants. We've really mucked with that whole balance. So we meet people where they're at, but then we progressively move up to higher and higher levels of diversity. And we teach people why it's important. Because it's the endogenous wisdom in the body that our ultimate antioxidant status and thriving depends on. And every single one of those pathways depends on nutrients. And there is nothing more nutrient dense than whole natural foods that present, for example, like I said, stalk of broccoli or an apple or an onion with hundreds of ingredients. Now, through the lens of hormesis, we understand that some of those substances are things that we, with our human intellect label as good versus bad. But you know, modern toxicological research makes it very clear that really low-grade trace exposure to toxins, yes, my friends, like lead and cadmium and thallium, is actually beneficial. It has a hormetic effect. And this is why when you look at research, even into toxicity, you see some really interesting, unexpected, for example, biphasic response in the data, where the dose does not make the poison. You don't look at the research and it says, okay, if I have a little bit of exposure, I have a little bit of toxic effects, right? If I go up to have a higher exposure, I have more toxic effects, right? And so on and so on and so on. Actually, what a lot of research into toxins shows is that tiny trace amounts actually supports antioxidant function. And it's once you get over that threshold that this particular substance can start to have pro-oxidant effects. Well, let me surprise you with regard to some research you may not be aware. Curcumin. We're all familiar with curcumin. It's a hot supplement right now, right? Curcumin being a particular extract from turmeric, right? The herb, or actually it's a root, turmeric. But it's smaller doses of curcumin that have actually been shown to stimulate antioxidant effects, right? Very clear. You've all undoubtedly seen published third-party research demonstrating this. However, on the opposite extreme, one of the reasons why very high doses of curcumin has been shown to be a good supportive complementary therapy for cancer treatment is because it's viciously pro-oxidant. This is the difference between 80 milligrams and 8 grams of a single substance. You could say it's having the same biphasic response, right? We need to understand that the body has adapted over a very, very long period of time, way before we got smart and thought that we know better than the body's wisdom, how it can best thrive. The body's been dancing with nature, right? With animals and plants and foods and phytonutrients and yes, microbes, dancing with it in order to evolve, right? Exactly. You're talking about low dose radiation, right? Yeah, we get that from the sun and it stimulates the synthesis of vitamin D. Right? This is beneficial, but we also know getting fried in a sunburn or getting way too much sun ends up having pro-oxidant effects. That's not because the sun one day is your friend and stimulates good stuff, and on a different day, the sun is your enemy and stimulates bad stuff, right? It's all about the level, right? Who are you showing up to the encounter? The sun is just like the mountain in my backyard. It's just like the stalk of broccoli or the trace amount, the amount of a toxin. Again, our label. Nature doesn't call it a toxin. But lead or cadmium, right? Who am I showing up to that encounter, right? And am I introducing it to myself in a type of dose that's appropriate for who I am in this moment? And that's not just about my genetics. That's also about the status of my health foundations. How well rested am I? How uninflamed am I? How well nourished am I? How well hydrated am I? Because on the days when I'm not all those things, I probably don't want to expose myself to too much, right? It's like people who, you probably have seen this in your practice as well, women who want to get pregnant. They're coming out of this like screaming stressful time in their job, in their family. They've been burning the candle at both ends. They're crazy stressed. They haven't been sleeping well. Their diet is crappy, but they want to get pregnant. Really? Does that make any sense? Who are they showing up to this encounter, right? Oh, people talk about, I'm dealing with all this craziness and I finally go on vacation and I get sick. Of course you do, because your immune system and your nervous system, in their crazy intelligent teamwork, finally felt like it was safe to counter that infection. Because until you went on vacation, your nervous system and your immune system and their teamwork weren't sure you were going to survive the month. Because based on all of that shit you've been thinking, they're not sure you're going to make it till the next day. Because your life seems over the deep end stressed, right? Our thoughts are the primary part of our environment that's communicating the status of our world to our body, to our incredibly intelligent and adaptive body. So, you've gotten the message that food matters in a big way, right? Well, let's talk about all those antioxidant supplements, especially the phytonutrients. So, absolutely, we can take amounts of these supplements that are certainly higher than what we would encounter in foods for a targeted purpose in order to stop a dysfunctional pathway in the body. And a great example of that is arthritis. Okay. Just one example of the myriad different chronic disease dynamics that we see in our modern practices today, where there's an imbalance, right, in pro-oxidant load and antioxidant capability, right? Understanding that that pro-oxidant load is some combination of what we're making internally just by being here that never goes away, right? Plus maybe the pro-oxidant load that's coming from maybe too much stress or too much blood sugar, or maybe the pro-oxidant load from exogenous things like radiation or, intense levels of toxic exposure, like smoking cigarettes, for example, or consuming a lot of glyphosate or BPA contamination in our foods, right? We can have these three or four different categories of where oxidative load comes from. And it's all about, again, how do we show up to the encounter? What's our capability? Well, we know that one of the reasons why joints attract oxidative damage is because they tend to trap immune complexes. And so you can have a source of inflammation in your gut, maybe from your food, maybe from a microbial imbalance that your immune system is busy fighting, right? Because immune function generates a whole heck of a lot of pro-oxidant species, right? That's part of how your immune system fights threats, is it engulfs it and throws bleach, right? Or peroxide on it, right? We've got some pretty oxidative compounds that the body uses as part of all of our endogenous capabilities. The immune system is really, really vicious. That's why we're still here having this conversation. But arthritis comes because joints are areas of low circulation, and it can easily trap immune complexes. And those immune complexes build up, they take up space, and those immune complexes themselves are pro-inflammatory. Of course they are. They're attracting secondary immune response that would normally wipe them out. Well, they're trapped in the joint. So the immune system is there, co-located, being drawn to the immune complexes, and there's peripheral damage to the joint because that's where the immune system is acting. It's where it's being drawn to deal with those immune complexes that may have come from your diet or from your microbiome. And so that does wear and tear on the joint. Well, now you have a whole secondary issue, because before you just had a food problem or a microbiome problem. Now you have a joint problem that's really just about collateral damage. Innocent bystander. Your joint just happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time, collecting and trapping immune complexes. And so, that ends up being oxidative damage to the joint. And now we've got the immune system coming in a secondary reaction to the joint on purpose, because now the joint is damaged and the immune system gets involved. And the immune system gets spiraled up, and this is how we get to the progressive degradation of damage and dysfunction and eventually disfigurement of a joint, because it was in the wrong place at the right time, right? It was caught in the crossfire, if you will, of inflammation coming from elsewhere in the body. This is where the functional medicine lens is so empowering for healthcare practitioners to be able to look at the body systemically rather than in the silos of a specialty, right? To become on fire, wildly capable generalists that can understand the common disease dynamics in certain body parts and systems, but be also able to look with strong competence at the systemic body. Well, they're endogenous antioxidants that are responsible for addressing that oxidative load in joints. One of the most common ones in joints in particular is superoxide dismutase, right? Really powerful, in particular, extracellular antioxidant. Well, we don't have a bucket of superoxide dismutase in our left butt cheek. We just don't. You got to make it. It certainly is being stimulated in the case where we've got a buildup of immune complexes, but is it being supported? Are the cofactors like the B vitamins and the minerals present enough to help provide appropriate antioxidant response? This is where boosting our own endogenous pathways with nutrients, right, at the same time that we're bringing down the oxidative load by improving our lifestyle, is part of what allows people to have resilient health. Not just doing one or the other, right? If you keep boosting endogenous antioxidants at the same time that you're not changing your life, like, it's okay, keep doing the same stuff you've been doing, but just take a supplement, that doesn't last very long. The goodness is very short-lived, right? On the other hand, if you have people try to live healthier and healthier lives, hopefully part of that involves food. If it just involves supplements, that's also not going to last very long because those endogenous pathways require nutrients. So we always want to be reducing the pro-oxidant burden where it's excessive, especially where there's big bolus impacts of it. Not trace amounts. The trace amounts supports hormesis and adaptive resiliency and vitality. But where we have bolus sources of oxidative challenge, right? We want to reduce those. But where we want to balance it is by also boosting endogenous antioxidant pathways. And that's not about living in a bubble. That's about continuing to expose yourself to adaptive hormetic challenge, right? A little bit of adventure, a little bit of stress, a little bit of pro-oxidant phytonutrients, right? A little bit of toxicity, a little bit of radiation, right? A little bit of motivation and, getting restless so that you feel inspired to do something with your life, right? People who don't have drive and motivation and inspiration to go and do things are much more likely to end up with being depressed, which we know promotes death from all causes. So you don't want to live in a bubble on any level, in any category. We want to be in life and engaged and allowing ourselves to experience a little bit of challenge, right? And when we don't feel that we have the best health foundations, when we haven't been boosting our sleep and boosting our mindfulness and boosting our nutrition and boosting our joy, right? Vitamin J. When we're not doing those things, it's not a good time to go face the mountain, right? Or start eating a lot of sushi with its mercury load, or taking on a really stressful work project, or getting pregnant, or detoxifying. Oh my gosh, the number of practitioners who make the massive mistake. The very first thing they want to do with someone who comes to them with fibromyalgia or an autoimmune disease is, okay, we're going to do detox. Crazy bad decision, right? They're not coming from a place of strength. They are going to have really poor results when they confront the mountain because their health foundations are not boosted enough to sustain, which is why people can have massive disease exacerbation or even secondary autoimmune disease development because of detoxification too soon and or too fast. We have to consider, who is this person? Not just are they accurately diagnosed with lupus or fibromyalgia or atherosclerosis or anything else, right? But who is this person? Where are they in their journey, and how do we best help them to understand the importance of redox balance so that we are working on both sides of the equation in order to find a better balance. And people are different. They need different support. But I will say that in terms of having good supportive hormesis effects happening through the body's wisdom, all over our physiology, which thank goodness we as lowly human brains don't have to try and figure out. The very fact that we think we're going to have outsmarted the human body because of 50 or 60 years of really good medical and biochemical research is ridiculous. The human organism is almost unfathomably complex. Our best path forward for any intelligent person is to understand the body's own endogenous pathways and activate the body's own intelligence for optimizing its endogenous adaptive response and trying to live in a way that keeps us in parasympathetic nervous system as a normal way of being, but also not 100%. People can get disease and die from having parasympathetic dominant nervous system modes, right? You have a lot of people in your practice who struggle with that. They have a hard time getting out of bed, right? They may have pain syndromes, right? Like chronic fatigue, for example. But we want to generally live a predominantly parasympathetic existence. Again, that 85-15, 90-10 kind of balance, where for that 10 or 15%, woo, live it up, right? Let's get in with, a little bit of stress and a little bit of sleep deprivation, right? Have an extra cocktail, have some kind of crap dessert, right? Go do something challenging, try something risky, right? Push yourself in your workout, right? We just don't want these things to become our norm, our baseline. But there are lots of messages in today's talk, right? Get rid of perfectionism. In fact, address this right up front with your patients so they don't mistakenly think that they have to be perfect to be healthy. Talk about promoting fear and a nocebo effect. A lot of people will walk away from you and your savvy expertise, not because they don't give you plenty of props, not because they don't believe you're credible and capable and all of that. They just think being healthy is going to be way too hard. They just don't have the discipline. They don't have the motivation. They don't have the funds. They don't have the skills, blah, 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 right? We need to confront right up front. It's your lucky day, because not only is perfectionism not required, it actually doesn't help. We're interested in a little bit of spice and variety, right? In order to stimulate balance in the body. And so what this means, and coming around to the concept of antioxidant supplements, right? If someone has acute arthritis, then yeah, absolutely, we want to look for where might there be nutrient insufficiencies that we can boost to help the body's own endogenous functioning. Things like optimal levels of omega-3 essential fatty acids, right? So that our cell membranes are nice and fluid. Optimal levels of zinc, which supports good balance of T regulatory cells to help prevent a hypervigilant immune system and sort of friendly fire from our white blood cells. Nutrients are absolutely key for that type of dynamic. But while the joint 24 hours a day, 7 days a week is being attacked, right, by the immune system, yeah, bring on things like curcumin and boswellia, right, or white willow bark in order to stop the cascade of badness. But the solution, just like the solution is not to keep taking Advil, ibuprofen twice a day for the rest of your life, much less stronger drugs. The solution is also not to keep taking boswellia twice a day, every day for the rest of your lives. Because ideally you help someone to get rid of the imbalance that promotes the need for that. And then they get to a place of vitality. And they stay there. And then when they get off in the weeds, they get back on track. Or if they get off in the weeds and they get kind of stuck in the weeds, you can help them with a short-term recommendation. But maybe they don't need boswellia then. Maybe it's something else. Maybe they can benefit then from alpha-lipoic acid, right? Maybe they've got oxidative stress more concentrated in their nervous system at that time rather than in their musculoskeletal soft tissue, right? And so we move the remedy and the intervention for rapid relief and reversing disease dynamics over time. Otherwise, what happens is what I've seen in my practice, literally dozens and dozens of times. People show up taking 35 supplements that were recommended to them 13 years ago, and they've been afraid to stop anything. And now, actually what has happened is those 13 supplements maybe helped them in the short term. And for a long time, they probably helped a little bit, but more and more of them were counterproductive and they didn't help. And eventually they started being part of the problem. And now they're showing back up with this basket load of things they spent a lot of money on for a really long time that not only aren't not helping now because they're not targeted for where the body is right now, but they may have actually started to cause a problem. And so this is where even things that you might really love and lean on, think about using them in a pulse fashion, right? Absolutely, if someone has type 2 diabetes and they're developing atherosclerosis and metabolic syndrome, then yeah, some S-acetylglutathione twice a day for the next couple of months may be a crazy smart intervention in order to stop the acute oxidative overload in the context of type 2 diabetes. But that assumes you're working with them to reverse the root causes of that insulin resistance so it goes away. And then they don't need that anymore. And you want to remove the glutathione in order to allow the body's own endogenous pathways to be stimulated, right? I hope this makes sense because it's how you develop a resilient capability. Otherwise, those pathways won't be stimulated and you're going to be dependent on that supplement. And I hope you don't forget to order it or just simply forget to stop taking it because you got to use it or lose it. You want to keep stimulating those pathways. And so as long as a dis-ease dynamic is at play, then yes, boosting our body's own endogenous pathways can be really valuable. Again, not megadose, but more moderate dose, appreciably more than food, but so there's that low-grade hormetic pro-oxidant stimulation to support the body. But eventually, if we want to remove those and think about primarily boosting the body with things that are needed in order to fortify our own endogenous pathways. And this is where I would make the argument that the best long-term supplementation for the body is things like joy, and water, and oxygen, and movement, right? We talk about vitamin J for joy, vitamin P for pleasure, vitamin H for hugs, things that are needed to support the endogenous pathways. Well, what do we need to support endogenous pathways, right? Minerals, B vitamins, pro-oxidant phytonutrient stimulation, and yes, a parasympathetic nervous system, right? These are things you want to be supplementing with on an ongoing basis. They promote the full restoration and maintenance of resilient health and vitality. So absolutely, people may have people may have innate issues that require long-term supplementation, right? They may have had surgery or prior damage, injury to a body part or a certain body system, and it just doesn't work. So it's not appropriate to lean 100% on their own endogenous capability. Totally respect that. Absolutely have to look for this in given individuals. They're given diet, the pieces of their lifestyle that they don't want to change. We have to meet people where they are with what they're willing and able to do right now. Okay. You may feel like someone who's eating a certain diet would really benefit from shifting it to get more of a given nutrient. Well, are they willing and able to do that? They get to decide. And so we have to support them with alternatives depending on what they're willing and able to do. Sometimes that's genetically mediated, right? People have a really hard time converting a certain nutrient or absorbing a certain nutrient or maintaining a certain nutrient, right? This is where we must cater to and support intervention customization for bioindividuality. It's important. It's critical. Outside of that, think about boosting the body's own endogenous pathways, not adding just another supplement. Because then you end up with people who are really healthy and taking 60 or 70 supplements because they believe they need them all. I think you could actually make the argument that while some of them are undoubtedly helping them, and you could be of great value by helping them to sort through which of those are actually needed for their unique bodies, but the rest of them may be really expensive urine and poop that's not necessarily doing anything, or it might actually be a bit counterproductive in terms of suppressing the body's own endogenous adaptation, which is a really interesting and different spin on what a lot of functional medicine education outlets are teaching, right? If we go upstream and help people deal in a resilient, sustainable way with the most common true root causes of disease, it's not lacking acetylglutathione as a supplement, right? It's crap food, toxins, and stress. It's living in the unhealthy default reality of today and progressively helping people to make those particular lifestyle choice changes step by step. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens at a pace that people can individually handle and manage. And it involves a partnership, right? Where the patient is in charge, they are leading, you build rapport so that they're able to be upfront with you about what they're willing and able to do right now. And we meet them where we are and we stay with them on the journey of progressively supporting the astoundingly intelligent and successful human organism, right? In order to thrive through its own innate capability. So it's an opportunity for you, even as practitioners, to take a look at what are you taking right now in terms of supplements, right? Is it addressing an active need or imbalance? Well, then by means, embrace it, right? If you feel fantastic and you're not embracing or addressing something that's currently active, maybe something that for the moment you can't change, right? A great example of that, enhanced intestinal permeability. Let's say someone is having to take a medication to just get through the day that we know is promoting enhanced intestinal permeability. Well, then, yeah, that's their reality right now. Asking them to have chronic searing pain every day is not helping anything, right? Because that's just going to fire up the sympathetic nervous system and do absolutely zero to support long-term healing. So we want to do things to support the continual buildup and healing and soothing of the gut lining. Right? So things like L-glutamine and mucilaginous herbs like deglycerized licorice and aloe, or yes, things like collagen or bone broth, right? These are things that can be really nourishing. If we're in an environment where, you know what, enhanced intestinal permeability is just part of who I am right now. It's part of my reality. Then we have to balance that, right? We have to encounter, we have to decide and customize who we are at the encounter in that given moment. But making smart choices about when can we leave those behind and trust our body's wisdom, trust our body's intelligence. That is, God is here and kept us here for a really long time through some really, really extreme challenges, right? Through the evolution of the human species. Trust that. The human body is not only not a dumb bucket, it's not weak. It's not weak in any level. It is astoundingly capable and intelligent, especially when we make choices that are most compatible with its own evolutionary wisdom that help it to thrive. I want to end by just saying, thank you for doing this work. Thank you for taking time out in order to boost your insight and your perspective as a progressive healthcare practitioner. But thank you for being a voice for change, an advocate for the body's own innate wisdom and the intelligence, the success that we can count on when we don't settle for just managing disease, when we trust the body's wisdom and the power, the capability of an educated and inspired and empowered individual in our practice to change their life and actually prevent or reverse disease and find true resilient health and vitality on the other side.